Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're all well. The death of Britain, the demise of the United Kingdom, something we're watching happen daily, really. But we're on History Debunked, by the way, 248,000 subscribers. It's nothing new, is what you're about to be told here. The death of Britain. It's something that started long ago and has took approximately 50 to 60 to 70 years to complete, really. It's the demise, but it's nothing new. It's just we're watching now. We're watching the end game of the demise in many ways, especially with the economy. So I find this channel really good, to be honest. History Debunked, and I like his crack, and I like the fact, again, as I've said before, he's an old timer, and I don't mean offence when I say that. I just He's seen the world a lot more than I have, longer than I have, probably double. Double. He's seen double of the world than I have, and with age comes wisdom. And if you pay attention, you've seen it all. And if you're old enough, you could have lived through the war. You know what I mean? The Second World War. Although I think you need to be sort of good 90 odd now to have lived through the Second World War. But again, just it's good to hear. I think that the Britain's dying. Do you know what I mean? And I was born in the 80s, and I've seen with the channel Paul Joseph Watson, if you watched the video before, of what London looked like maybe 50 years ago, 40 years ago, and what it looks like now. And everything's just gone to rack and ruin, but it kind of started before that. It's just took a long time to filter in and break down and get where we were going, to be honest, and destination bagwash would be the way of it. So I'm going to play this video because, again, yet again, very interesting, and a man who's seen it all go down and what it used to be and lived through it all. And I've only lived through half of what this man has, you know what I mean? So you have to bow down to wisdom and experience. And again, just I feel sorry. I feel sorry for these people more than anyone, because they've watched this country die on its arse now for most of their lives, to be honest, to the point that it's now become real apparent to everyone, to be honest, or most people, anyone who's paying attention. So let's have a listen.
Hello again. There was a time in this country, well within living memory, when things were very different from the way they are now. Almost without exception, marriages were lifelong commitments. Mothers raised their children until they were 5. There were no abortions. Homosexuality was frowned upon. Illegitimate babies and single mothers were practically unheard of. And Sundays were special days of rest when many people went to church. Britain was a Christian nation, and our values were those of the Bible. Crimes of violence were rare, schools limited themselves to the teaching of academic subjects, and the elderly were respected. It was a peaceful and calm and safe country. Then the 1960s arrived, and all this was swept away. The Labour government.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. The video is called "How Labour Trashed the Country for the First Time During the So-Called Swinging 60s." So yeah, sort of 60, 65 years, 66 next year could be completion, 66 years, 66, side of the devil. So, yeah, it's interesting to listen to all that and what this country used to be and how it used to be. And I was born into it. It was still in many ways like that in the 80s, not quite as the same, to be honest, because again, he says here the 60s, it started in the 60s. It was 20 years. 20 years of demise had passed before I arrived, you know what I mean? So, very interesting, though, to hear how it used to be.
Government, which was voted in by a narrow majority in 1964, was determined to revolutionise society because they didn't like the traditional ways of life which most people accepted, a way of life which in the 1950s was not all that different from the 1920s or 1930s, other than the fact that people were a good deal better off financially. We remember Harold Macmillan saying that most people had never had it so good. I will remark in passing that almost everybody in the country at that time was white, and that these white people were almost invariably British, although there were, of course, Irish folk and some Poles who had not returned to their own country after the war, because the communists had taken over. I remember this country at that time, and although it seemed a little dull, it was as safe and stable as anybody could wish.
Yeah, as safe and stable as anyone could wish. And you kind of look back at history and look back at Britain and the past, and you kind of see that. And even with the Paul Joseph Watson video showing you London, sort of in the 70s and the 80s, and it's unbelievable how far we fell. To be honest, it's unbelievable.
Labour set about abolishing the death penalty, making divorces easier, legalising homosexuality, and so on. And they also made a time for a bill by Liberal David Steele to pass through Parliament, a bill which legalised abortion. Young people found this all very exciting. I was a teenager in the 1960s, and it was exciting. Everything was changing. All our old certainties were being thrown into the melting pot, and anything was possible. The swinging 60s, with all those boring things like stable and lifelong marriages thrown out, and all the rest of it, the contraceptive pill arrived at the same time that abortion was legalised. And so marriage began to be seen as old fashioned and unnecessary. Why should women stay at home with their babies and small children? Better that they should prevent pregnancies if they could, or if they did have children, there was no need for marriage and staying at home with the little ones. Just leave them in a state run nursery.
Yeah, I mean, women's liberation had now to do with women's liberation. It was everything to do with sending women into work so that you could also pay tax and further the economic fucking government here. That's all they were thinking about here. Get yous into work so you can literally double the workforce, you know what I mean? Double the tax. So nothing to do with women's liberation, to be honest. Everything to do with fucking economic fucking government bastards, to be honest.
I wonder
Above the government, to be honest.
if anyone would like to remind me how that worked out for our children.
Yeah, it's like not good. Societies fell. I mean, the reasons are like there's so many. It's little things. Lots of little things have created a big problem in a way.
Was it really an improvement on being raised in traditional families with a mother and father? Christianity, of course, became for old fogies, and we could all agree that God was dead and everybody could do pretty much as they pleased. People like Roy Jenkins were at the forefront of promoting this new way of life. Oh, and then too, we needed lots more immigrants, and everybody must be forced by means of a Race Relations Act to rent them houses and give them jobs. After being voted out in 1970, Labour came back in 1974 and spent 5 years reducing this country to beggary. No wonder we didn't let them back until 1997, when they then proceeded to inflict more incalculable damage on the country. Some viewers might see a recurring pattern here, which is that every time Labour gets in, they screw this country up and cause it harm. I don't think that Keir Starmer is going to prove any exception to that rule. I think in retrospect he might be seen as even worse than people like Tony Blair and Harold Wilson.
Yeah, so there it is. History debunked. A very interesting video. Again, love the channel. To be honest, love the channel. Um, shit show, shitting bagbosh Britain shit show that it has become in 2025, but just again very interesting what it used to be like and all the changes, and again Labour shaft us every day of the week. New Labour now, that was a load of bollocks as well. Like basically, let's not elect Labour here. You know what I mean? There is something here